The first droplets of rain smack the plain glass window. I stand on one side, fiddling the small recorder in one hand, and nursing a glass of scotch in the other. On the other side of the window, an expansive city sprawls out in every direction, and high above it, the storm that has been brewing is finally starting to burst. The rain droplets will soon be a downpour. Storms make me nervous. A thin bolt of lightning rips through the sky, momentarily illuminating the fat, heavy, dark clouds. There were plenty. No stars will show tonight. Another silent streak of light, and I see the normally bustling street below has gone quiet, save for the spark sprinkle. Yellowed cabs scurry about like insects, collecting their payments, and they drop off their late-night patrons. The faint sound of rolling thunder can be heard, muffled by the thick glass of my office. 18 stories up, I see the rain intensifying before those below. Normally, the dampening of the window prevents all outside noise. It's important for the patients to feel safe. Now, long after my office has closed, I find the thunder far more jarring than the constant wearing of the air conditioning system, always pumping in oxygen that somehow smells fresh and artificial simultaneously. I understand. I take another short sip of my drink and turn away from the oncoming turmoil, returning to my desk. I find my eyes drawn to the framed certificates and degrees hung about my walls, questioning their ultimate meanings. I know that I am safe in my office, my own personal slice of the world. But again, storms make me nervous. They didn't always. Quite the opposite, in fact. As a child, I was rather fond of the whip cracks in the sky, the smell of fresh rain. My distaste for them, I can actually pinpoint. It's a direct correlation to one of my patients. The one patient that scared me. Now, I've dealt with some truly sick and disturbing minds in over 25 years as a psychologist, but only one has ever truly frightened me. I currently hold a tape recording of our one and only session in my hand. Jack Lowe. The man was a lunatic, no doubt about that. His delusions tearing his mind, pushing him further and further from reality as each second ticked away. It was in this very office that I met Jack, and sometimes, on nights like these when I find myself unable to pry his words free from my mind, I can almost see him sitting across from me, cigarette dangling in his hand. On nights like this, like tonight, the only remedy for my obsession is to listen to the recording and drink. I loosen my tie as I place the recorder on my desk, and then I sip my scotch. I pull the bottle from the small shelf hidden under my desk and place it next to the small black device, inside of which a tape labeled Louis Jack Section 1 resides. I hesitate for the briefest second before pressing play, leaning back in my chair and shutting my eyes. "Marty, please send Mr. Lowe." I hear my own voice coming from the speaker. It's so vivid. The picture in my mind at hearing his name contours. I hear shuffling before the unmistakable sound of my office door squeaking open. I remember so clearly the man who walked through and into my life all those years ago. He was thin, one step above emaciated in fact. Baggy clothes that wore the man instead of the other way around. He clearly had Norwegian ancestry. Dirty blonde shoulder-length hair that was quite messy. His unshaven cheeks gave way to a thick patch of blonde hair on his chin that I think must have been a goatee of sorts before he had let himself go. Immediately, I saw a horrendous case of insomnia. The purple skin on his sunken eyes would have been a giveaway for even someone wholly untrained in mental illnesses. "Have a seat, Mr. Lowe." I hear the smile in my voice. "Just Jack," A new voice joins the cast. I feel the hairs on the back of my neck prickle, hearing his soft, almost whisper once again. I downed the remainder of my glass and swiftly refilled it. Hello, Jack. I'm Dr. Harkins. Your paperwork here says you're dealing with. I hear the sound of paper shuffling and silently mouth the next word in tandem with my past self. Hallucinations. A period of silence follows on the recording, but my clear recollection fills in the gap. Jack, with his eyes locked on the floor, nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. There was such a distraught feeling surrounding the man, and I can still feel the uneasiness shoot through my veins like ice. How long has this been going on, Jack? I asked, no hint of the smile in my words. It's not a persistent thing, Doc. It happened one time. I can't sleep though. I can't eat, I can't... He trailed off. I remember him placing his hand softly on his face and rubbing the heels of his palms into his eyes. I'm losing my fucking mind, Doc. I need something. Jack said the words with a shaky, uncertain tone. What do you think you need, Jack? I asked. That's why I'm here, right? To figure out a way to forget, yeah? A slight hint of agitation permeated his voice. Forget? Let's go back, Jack. You said the hallucinations were an isolated event, I asked. My dad died, yeah, and I know strings like to think everything is linked to something with someone or another parent thing, but it wasn't that. See, Dad and me, we weren't close, not since I was a kid. He always paid more attention to my sister, even back then. She's the one who called me to tell me the news. The words flowed hectically from Jack's mouth, and I remember the sheer desperation in his eyes when he looked up at me. They pleaded, begged me to hear him out and not jump to conclusions. Alright, go on, Jack. I like to hear about everything. My voice conveyed a sense of calm, attempting to ease Jack, help him relax. You, care if I smoke? He asked. I recall waving my hand in a by all means gesture. The small sound of metal scraping a flint followed. So yeah, Danny called me and said Dad died. It's sad, but it happens, right? I asked her what happened. Jack jabbed his now burning cigarette in my direction. Cancer, of course. What else? So, I asked her about the funeral. 2 days. No problem. I'll drive down to Connecticut, spend some time with my family, and honor the old man's legacy. I packed up some shit. Man, I can't believe I'm telling you this. You're gonna think I'm out of my fucking mind. Hell, I probably am. The soft taste of his cigarette burning followed his words as he took a long drag. I am not here to judge you, Jack. I am here to listen to you and come up with a way to help. I don't think you're crazy, I assured him. The cold, skeptical look he gave me, crossing his hands between his knees, dangling his cigarette. It sticks with me to this day, and I truly believe that I'll carry it to my grave. I poured my third glass. So I'm picking some things for a few days, and I hit the road first thing in the morning. I called Danny as soon as I left the city, telling her that I'd be there tomorrow. Yeah? Yeah, she tells me. Yeah, okay, let me call Ray. That's her husband. Right, so she tells me let me call Ray, see if we can get the guest room set up in time. If not, Mom still has your old room set up back home. She tells me she's gonna be back in 15 minutes. All good, right? Jack paused and looked at me inquisitively. He must have been aware of his frantic, almost manic speech pattern. I nodded, again in unison with my past self, except I remembered. On cue, Jack continued. So, I do what anyone does. Toss the cell in the passenger seat and crack some tunes. I remember some 90s boy band, but I was alone, no shame. I blasted it. It was nice out too. Green trees, blue sky. I rolled on the window And remember, Doc, I remember the air tasting and smelling so fresh. In spite of the bad news, I was feeling pretty damn great. He had glanced away at this, taking another draw of his cigarette. He felt ashamed. He thought it was wrong to feel good in light of a parent's death. So would you say it was a pleasant drive? I asked, beginning to pry, attempting to do exactly what his eyes had begged me not to, and connect his unhealthy mental state to the death of his father. At first it wasn't so bad, yeah, pleasant, but that didn't last. You notice some shitty drivers around you. You pay attention when cars behind or in front of you merge, or exit, but you never really pay attention to not having anyone else around you. It took me a while to realize that in 2 hours of driving, I hadn't seen a single car besides me. Now, it was still pretty early, so weird, but not that weird. I did notice though, that not one damn commercial had played on the radio, just straight 90s hits. The burning sound of cigar paper again, followed quickly by another flint of the lighter. Jack's lead began furiously tapping, and I recall wondering if it was anxiety or substance withdrawals. Danny hadn't called either. He continued after a moment. She said 15, and it had been a couple of hours by then. I just figured she got caught up dealing with that shit and forgotten to call me back. Whatever, no biggie. So I picked up the phone, right? And I just punched in her digits. This is where I got fucked up, Doc, because after 2 rings, I heard that automated number no longer in service message. I looked at my phone and sure enough it was Danny's name. I was confused, so I tried again. And again I got the do. He imitated the electronic beeps and raised his hands into a shrug. Number not in service. You think I'm some kind of nut, yeah? He finished, dropping his hands to his side. Not at all, Jack. I lied. Yeah, so, anyway, I'm getting a little weirded out at this point. Thinking something's wrong, and then boom, it hits me. I try a different number. I call my job, back in the city. You guessed it, a robot telling me to fuck off, cause the number just isn't in service. I call number after number. Nothing. I just start to think my phone is broken, so I call 911. That shit's supposed to work from any phone, service or not. Same fucking message. As if that wasn't freaky enough, Doc. The second I hit the end call button, the radio cuts out. Almost right away it comes back on. And you know what the song was? It was nothing. There was no song. On this channel that was apparently 24/7, all 90s, no commercial gem. No, I heard the fucking robot voice, and she was just saying random ass numbers. He said, starting to get a flustered look on his face. A number stations? I asked, enthralled with his tale, as far-fetched as it was. I could tell that he wholeheartedly believed every word was true. No, not really, Jack said abruptly, as he stood from his chair and began to pace around the room. 1212. That's it. That's all the robot bitch would say. Over and over. 1212. Bizarre, right? I thought maybe binary, but no. There was no break in the pattern. Not a single double either digit. Just 12. Repeat. I raised my brow and allowed my eyes to track the man, who was increasingly lost in his thoughts. He continued. Changing the station didn't help, and the power off button worked as well as the volume, as in they didn't. Useless. Every dial was useless. It was driving me crazy, Doc. I knew I had to pull over. I was getting lightheaded. And then I saw it. The only building around. I was so relieved to see other cars in the parking lot. Just a few, but god damn it was a good sight to see. He said, and chuckled nervously, shaking his head in disbelief. If only I'd known, right? So I park and get out of my ride, and do one of those fast walks up to the building. This place was like a truck stop, mixed with a convenience store. You know the kind. The type a family would stop at on their way to a vacation to get their kids snacks and drinks. Yeah, So I think, why not grab a snack and drink? I was already starting to shake that paranoia and was calling myself silly, pushing the unexplainable from my mind as I opened the glass door. That little jingle bell attached to it startled me, but in a good way. It was the first non-robotic sound I've heard in a while. Inside, it looked normal, like you'd expect. Row of candles and chips, fluorescent lights shining onto white floor tiles. And most importantly, there were other people. I was never happier to hear a fucking baby cry, man. Jack said, flopping back into his chair and lighting another cigarette. I remember now, recalling everything with the recorder's aid. The way Jack's face sank, there was silence, and I take that moment to top off my scotch. I know what's coming, and the warmth the alcohol fills my body with is competing with the chills in my bones. Jack? My past self urged. Yeah, right. This is where everything got fucked, he said softly, almost as if asking permission. I nodded, and he proceeded to take the reins, determined to tell his tale. When me and Danny were kids, and I'm talking little, like I was maybe 8 or 9, and she was probably 6, there was an accident. See? You know how when you're little you're carefree and don't think about consequences or shit. So there we were, playing outside, right? And we came across a knife, like a kitchen knife. We both knew we weren't supposed to mess with shit like that, especially rusty shit that looked like it had been dropped years ago by like a family moving or something. Anyway, we thought we were badass. Long story short, I got stabbed in the belly. It was an accident. Like I said, we were kids. It was pretty bad though. Had to get stitches, a tetanus shot, and Danny got a hard talking to. It left this scarly scar. It's important, so remember it, yeah? Anyway, back to the convenience store. I'm noticing more people. Let's see, we got Crime Baby and Mama. Overweight trucker, bald dude in his suit, really cute lady, and a few others. Oh yeah, the tired looking guy man in the cash register, which doubled as one of those bubblegum stands, with stacks and stacks of cigarettes behind him. Things are looking normal, right? And I'm starting to forget about the weird shit in the car. I'm sure I had some weird self-service and the radio was just glitchy, so I grabbed a bottle of pop from the black cooler and grabbed a bag of sunflower seeds. Yeah, head to the checkout. Dude gives me a hey, anything else for you? Right, and I say, yeah, let me get a pack of smokes, and point behind him. He turns around and grabs the pack and goes to hand it to me, but freezes just as he starts to extend his hand. From his mouth comes a deep but light sound. Jack imitated the sound and produced an eerie, unsettling noise that was like a low moan. I was about to ask the dude what the fuck was wrong with him, but just as I opened my mouth, a loud rip of thunder cracked outside. It sounded deafening, like lightning had struck right next to me. The lights went out, and the glass front of the store lit up a brilliant electric blue. I turned my attention to it, and saw streaks of lightning slash in the sky like some huge electric god was swiping his claws across the clouds. The blue sky was gone, and in its place was blackness. I turned back to the guy behind the counter. He wasn't doing that sound anymore, thank fuck, but he was still frozen in place. Pack of cigarettes still in his outstretched hand. I've reached out for them. I don't know why I did it, but at the time I wasn't thinking clearly, I guess. Anyway, I did. And as soon as my fingers touched the box of cigs, it's like my perspective shifted or something. My vision kind of adjusted, and I could see that he was a standee, a cardboard box cutout. My fingers sat on the flat, glossy surface, and I felt the urge, the need to press. So I did. And the flat standee with the image of the cashier on it, it fell backwards, softly dropping into the floor. I freaked. I gasped, unable to catch my breath. I stumbled backwards into what had been a display of snacks, but was now a rectangular protrusion sticking up from the floor, with the images of snacks painted on. I bolted over the glass window as another impossibly loud crack of thunder clapped in the sky above. Rain was beating the windows, blurring the world outside, but what I could make out was just as insane as what was happening inside. All of the cars, aside from mine, were gone, and my blue sedan sat on the edge of what looked like a cliff. I scanned with my eyes squinting, and saw that it was as if the ground had been ripped from the earth. Beyond the jagged, torn earth was blackness, nothingness. At that point, I was sure that a gigantic hand had reached down from somewhere beyond the cosmos and grabbed the convenience store and dragged it into space. I began to scream, turning to see that all of the other patrons were static, as flat as the cashier had been. More standees, right? And I saw that everything in this store was a farce. The rows of snacks, all fake. The displays, fake. Fuck, Doc. Even the big round security mirrors in the upper corners of the aisles looked like circles painted gray. Not a hint of reflection to them. Still screaming, I looked for the door. Nowhere. The door was fucking gone. I looked back to my car, and the thing, it was the solvent, being washed away by the rain. That's when I heard a voice, echoing my own thoughts. "What the fuck is happening?" she said. I whipped around and saw a girl sitting on her ass, lit up by the blue glow from the constant streaks of light in the sky. I could see that she was terrified. Jack took a moment to wipe the tears that were falling down his stubbled cheeks, and lit another cigarette before speaking again. She looked about 19 or 20. I didn't recognize her, but she wasn't cardboard, and I considered that a win. I stopped screaming and ran to her, offering her my hand. I was saying thank God, so happy not to be alone, you know. She looked relieved too. Through her tears and terror, she looked happy to see me too. She took my hand, and I helped her to her feet. As soon as she was standing, her eyes widened to the point I expected them to fall out. "What the fuck are those?" she asked me in a panic whimper. I turned to see the silhouette standing motionlessly at the window, backlit by the blue, contracting their glowing red eyes. They stood shoulder to shoulder, encircling the building. Silently they stood guard as the storm raged around them. With each flash of lightning, I caught a glimpse of their nightmarish metallic surfaces. Skeletons. They were metal skeletons. Jack wholeheartedly chuckled at this. Clearly it was forced, judging by the way his eyes continued to pour their tears. Felt a little like John Connor. Not as brave though, as my instinct was to pull the girl along with me to the back of the store, trying to put as much distance between us and those fucking things as I could. They made no attempt to chase though. They just watched as we pressed our backs to the facade that used to be coolers. The girl was breathing hard and fast, and suddenly she shrieked out, "Look!" pointing a finger to an ugly green door nearby. We had no other options, so we booked it. We got to the door, only to see that it was lacking a knob. So it seemed we were fucked, yeah? Not quite. I unleashed a fury of kicks on the bastard, forcing it open with a spray of splinters. We hurried through, into a storeroom. I guess it was what it was. It had what looked like to be a mud bucket and spray bottles, but I couldn't be sure since they were extremely crude and appeared to be made of paper mache. The girl had rushed to the back of the room. "Look!" She pointed to a ladder that was attached to the back of the wall. My eyes followed it to see a hatch, roof access. Almost instantly, I heard the glass front of the store shatter. The sound of hurricane-like winds began to fill the building. "Hurry!" she shouted over the gale, waving me up. I did go up. I climbed and climbed. First 10 feet, then 20, then 30. The hatch only inching closer. I refused to look down. I knew that I'd been climbing for way too long. Much higher than I knew the trip should have been. The hatch continued to move ever so slowly closer, and I was completely aware that the room was getting smaller as I climbed. The walls closed around me until I was surrounded by 4 cylinders of concrete, no wider than a manhole cover. I could hear the girl following me closely, but no words were exchanged. Finally, after climbing hundreds of feet into the air, I had reached the hatch door. I was terrified as I grabbed for the handle. I didn't want to lose my grip and fall into whatever hell was below. I pressed it and opened it despite the resistance. I was able to climb out of the claustrophobic hole and onto the roof. As soon as I was free, I turned to help the girl. You're probably expecting me to say something like, she wasn't there, right? Oh no, she was there. A fucking cardboard box cutout, reaching out for me. As soon as I recognized it, she fell from the ladder and softly descended into the orange glow far below. I stood, feeling the wave of anxiety crushing me, and I watched the hatch slam close. Before I could react, a brilliant white light from above blinded me. I felt myself fading from existence, my atoms separating. I lost myself. The next thing I remember is the white light dissipating, and my eyesight coming back. Blurry at first, but it focused as my hearing returned. I can't quite explain what I heard. It was organic, but mechanic at the same time. Clicks and whirring. I blinked a few times, and blinking felt so weird, like my eyes were different. I flicked them around, and when they landed on two absurdly tall, scale-covered insectoids, I was thrown into a panic attack. I tried to move, to get away, but I found that I couldn't. I was restrained, apparently on my back. My limbs and head tightly fixed to whatever I was lying on. My rattling had drawn the attention of the creatures, who looked at me with bulbous eyes. The clicking and buzzing sound had been coming from them, and I found that thought especially horrifying. They began frantically pressing buttons on a panel, seemingly connected to whatever was holding me in place. Some kind of operating table, or medical bed, I assume. Then, the strangest thing happened. Doc, my head cleared, and the buzzes and clicks, I began to comprehend them. I was almost able to understand. I was getting words like awake and hurry. Then the most intense pain of my life ripped through my brain. I screamed, and was terrified to find that the scream wasn't my own. I heard one of the creatures clearly through the pain, and it said, "Put it back in. If it crashes again, we'll deal with it at that point." And the other replied, "There might be errors," as it pulled the lever. The instant that happened, I felt the sensation of dissolving again. My molecules separated and rearranged. The intense light filled my vision once more. The next thing I know, I'm hearing a ringing, my vision unblurred, and I saw that the sound was coming from my phone, already in my hand. I looked around to find that I was free of any restraints, and back in my apartment, here in the city. I answered the phone and Danny's voice filled my head, distant and muffled at first, but rapidly becoming sharp and clear. "Hey bro, just checking in on you. What have you been up to?" she asked. Danny, I was on my way there, and something happened," I shout. "Whoa, calm down. What's going on? Why were you coming here? Is everything okay?" she asked. She sounded concerned, but a bit standoffish. I told her I was coming to the funeral. "Who died?" she asked. I was quiet for a moment, remembering what the insect creature had said. There could be errors. I lied and told Danny that it was an old friend of mine from school, and that I'd call her about it later. "That's about it, Doc. That's what I've been dealing with. I don't know what to think. Am I some kind of experiment? Am I a criminal among a race of bug aliens, and this world is my prison? Is this whole world, no, universe, some kind of simulation just for me? Doc, I don't think I'm human. Hell, I'm not even convinced the human race ever existed. If I die, is it possible that all of this gets blinked out of existence? Is that possible, Doc?" Jack said through a torrent of tears. "Jack, isn't it much more likely that this was a psychotic break? Tell me, do you have a history of drug abuse?" I ask, but just as I do, a voice from the recorder interrupts. "Doctor, your next appointment is here," Marnie says. "We'll pick this up next week, Jack," my past self says, and I hear myself stand from the chair. I wince, dreading the last thing Jack ever said to me. I clearly remember him standing and raising his shirt, revealing a smooth, thin, but unscarred stomach. Errors. There may be errors. followed by the sound of my office door opening and closing. A long moment of silence followed before I heard myself ask Marty to please cancel my remaining appointments for the day. The recorder clicks and brings me back to the present. The storm continues outside. I find myself contemplating Jack's story for the millionth time. He never came back for his next appointment. It's entirely possible that he had simply lied about the stab wound, but the look on his face, I don't know. Is there a chance that he really did experience these outlandish things? If so, what does that imply? Maybe that's why I decided to share this with the world tonight. I no longer wish to bear this alone. I think chronocycling this, while it's definitely a breach of my confidentiality agreement, is the healthiest thing for me. I wish I could purge his story from my mind, but I can't help but be uncomfortable when it storms.